an independent commission from examining the attacks and continue to rail against the current special committee. And for now, the committee will continue its work actually behind closed doors, aiming for a second hearing sometime in August during the recess. Joining me this morning to talk more about all of this, Suzanne Chod, Associate Professor of Political Science at North Central College, and Bill Muck, Chair of the North Central College Department of Political Science, which makes him the boss. Guys, good to see you again.
You too.
Good to be here.
Bill, you're the boss. Let me start with you. Democrats have said they don't want this process to be political. Republicans say it's purely political. But even one of the Capitol officers in his testimony said everything about this is political, from the impetus to the purpose of it. So how do they move away from politics in this process? Is it even possible?
It's going to be really, really difficult. I fully assume that the committee is going to be cautious and careful and try to avoid those pitfalls. But at every turn, you're going to have Republicans bringing this up, talking about the partisan nature of the committee. So they will remind everybody of this. And it's important to know that we could have avoided all of this. You know, the House passed legislation that would have created a 9/11 type commission, which would have avoided, it wouldn't have been just bipartisan, it would have been nonpartisan. So we could have avoided all of this. Now, Senate Republicans voted that down. And then the result is we're going to see politics play out throughout the rest of this. And to be honest, Republicans, they benefit from that, right? They're thinking about the midterms. They're thinking about finding a way to shift the conversation away from January 6th. So I assume we're going to see politics throughout all of this.
Suzanne, let me take that a step further as you want to respond to that, which is, look, objectively, I think people on both sides found the officer's testimony to be quite moving, quite powerful. I myself, I'll be honest with you, I thought, you know, it's a smart way for Democrats to start because it puts out the fact that these events happened. There were armed people attacking them that day, and these guys were hurt. How do you attack that? And then, of course, it happened. You know, outright attempts to basically deny the factual stories of these officers. So my question is, where do you go from here if even eyewitness testimony can't break through?
Yes, we seem to be at an impasse where we maybe didn't think we would be. I mean, I think before January 6th, we thought things couldn't get worse, and then we saw that it did, and then these things continued to come up. And so now, because as you mentioned, Paul, things are going behind closed doors and subpoenas, we found out today, are going to be issued. I think now we're going to see a period where the Republicans are going to say, similar to other investigations, this is all behind closed doors. See, now we have no transparency. Whomever gave that testimony that was public, those were just a few of the people, and they had an agenda. They voted for Biden. And so now we kind of move into what always happens in investigations, which is closed door. And this is all going to come up again. And if there are public testimony, or if there is public testimony in hearings again, which we expect there to be, now it's going to move into officials that worked for the Capitol Police, for the Trump administration. Some are arguing Mark Meadows is going to be subpoenaed. And so to Bill's point about politics and sort of the posturing, that is going to hit a level with which we have never seen before.
Well, you know, Bill, as Suzanne says, the next phase is testimony. There will be depositions, so there'll be some things being said before it ever gets into a public hearing. And interestingly, the Biden administration has issued a formal statement saying they're not going to interfere with it. No executive privilege is going to go on here for any of the folks who are going to testify. My question for you is, back to the politics of this. Does an outcome even matter? I mean, should we expect some kind of blockbuster testimony from, you know, everybody's talking about some of the players Suzanne did, but like Mike Pence, he could be called in to testify here. Do we expect any blockbuster testimony, or is it just the nature of our political times that this outcome just doesn't matter?
I think probably the latter, right? I mean, think about, we've had 2 impeachments. We also had the Mueller investigation, and you had a president who wasn't charged, wasn't removed from office. So the trend line, I think, is heading that way. We'll see some damning evidence that will come out, but it's unlikely to lead into anything. And I think that's just a reflection on the political system that we're in right now, the political and the legal system we're in. That doesn't mean it's not important, right? I think oftentimes getting to the truth is so important for the long-term implications of the country. When you look over time and you look back across history, political violence erupts when a country doesn't grapple with its history. So even though it's unlikely to lead to any consequences in the short term, I think long term it still is important that the United States and the country goes through this.
Suzanne, here's another piece of something that you would just sort of say, I never saw that one coming, which is obviously with people like Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney on the special committee, it's hard not to look at this as a bipartisan effort. They are not just Republicans, they are conservative Republicans, but of course, enter social media and and you know, and yeah, social media and also television conservative media. And now they are rhinos. They are Pelosi puppets. You might be able to say that about some people, but Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, I just don't get that. How does that play?
You know, we've gotten to a point now where we see this blind partisan loyalty. And often, and Bill knows this better than anyone, that is typically aligned with dangerous blind nationalism. And so we're getting in this very slippery slope now where anyone who speaks out against this former president who has such a stronghold on the party still, that one step, one tiny step, and I would argue this is a tiny step, out from sort of the tagline of the party makes them not real Republicans. It makes them traitors. It makes them disloyal. It makes them, there's talk of impeaching them, which is not something that can happen, of course. But I think, what we see, particularly with Kinzinger, he's very smart in the decision to accept the invitation. I think we all know he's a rational actor who's jockeying for a higher position in government. That doesn't make it a good choice for him. It doesn't mean that he can't job, but it's definitely a good choice for him to do, especially after Kevin McCarthy was very smart in how he played this, where he said, okay, you want Republicans on it? I'm going to give you 2 Republicans who perpetuated the big lie. So then Pelosi said, we don't want them. And now we get this snowball effect here where we end up with Kinzinger and Cheney. And that really plays well for McCarthy's strategy.
I'm going to turn, we got a minute left, so I want to turn topics for a minute because I do want to ask us something very quickly about infrastructure. The earth sort of shook as you had a bipartisan agreement, Bill, on the infrastructure bill. We'll see where it happens. But of course, Nancy Pelosi says she's not even taking it up unless they get that reconciliation $3.5 trillion bill to come through. Sort of curious as to your view. Do you really see the infrastructure bill not passing, the first time in decades that something could pass because people just aren't happy that they're not getting the extra bill and such like that? About 30 seconds, Bill.
Well, we're seeing the tensions within the Democratic Party, right? So everybody's been playing nice and they're all on the same team, but we see there are very, very different interests within that party. And the infrastructure bill versus the spending bill, Nancy Pelosi and all the Democrats have to walk a very, very fine line. They're going to get that infrastructure bill done. I mean, it's too big, but it may be very awkward and very uncomfortable in the process.
All right. Bill, Muck, Suzanne, Chod, we appreciate your time. We got to have you back. We will. Have a good Sunday.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Still to come on WGN.